That night, the police were sure a father was beating his daughter. I was sure he was the only chance she had. It all started way less dramatic. 3 a.m, the smell of fried bacon baked into my skin, and my one true wish in life, to get home and faceplant into my pillow. I'm Mia, 31, waitress in a 24-hour diner on the edge of Oak Ridge. Yes, I've got a degree in child psychology. Yes, I work where people think refill is a personality trait. This is America, honey. Dreams are financed by student loans and double shifts. I'd already turned into the alley between the car wash and an old brick building when I heard someone sniffle. Honestly, my first thought was, please, not another drunk college kid. I was already mentally switching into calm voice mode and preparing to call an Uber and an ambulance when in the weak streetlight I saw that this was not a college kid. It was a child. Little girl, maybe 5 or 6. Pink hoodie, hair down, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at me with eyes like a terrified animal. Clean sneakers, decent clothes, and absolutely alone. Hey! I crouched down, trying not to look like a kidnapper. Hi, are you lost? She flinched, hunched her shoulders, and wrapped herself tighter. Not a word, just breathing. Way too fast for a body that small. Somewhere deep inside me, something clicked in a bad way. That familiar cold in your chest when you're little again. Your drunk mom is screaming behind the door, and you're trying to breathe so quietly she forgets you exist. That's the cosmic joke. People who most wanted to be invisible as kids grow up and run straight into let me help everyone professions. Some become doctors, some social workers. I picked therapy. On paper. In reality, I was standing in an alley with a stranger's kid who smelled like fear and asphalt. Look, it's chilly out here, I said, more businesslike now. How about we at least stand up? My diner's right on the corner. It's bright, it's warm, they have hot chocolate. I won't touch you if you don't want that, okay? Nothing. Her fingers just got whiter on that hoodie. I automatically scanned around us. Empty. No adults. No cars. Windows dark. That special moment when you realize, yeah, you're the adult, and you either step in or spend the rest of your life replaying how you walked away. I sighed and pulled out my phone. First person I dialed was Tessa. Tess is my friend and the official adult in Adult World. Licensed clinical social worker with local child protective services. In other words, the person who sees this kind of kid every day, and this kind of mom, like mine. Mia? Her voice came through sleepy, but the kind of sleepy that can snap awake in half a second. You know what time it is? 3:07. Listen, I found a kid in an alley. Little girl, maybe 5, alone, scared out of her mind, not talking. The pause went ice cold. Did you already call 911? I called you first, I admitted, hearing how dumb it sounded as I said it. She's sitting on the ground. She's shaking. I don't want to leave her alone. Mia. Tess switched to the tone she uses for especially stubborn officials. Right now you're split between your childhood trauma and the criminal code. You take that kid somewhere bright, you stay with her, and you call 911. Tell them you're willing to be a support person until CPS gets there. I'll wake up our on-call social worker and probably a detective. And Mia, don't disappear before they arrive. I'm not the disappearing type, I muttered. You know that. Exactly why I love you. Call 911. She hung up. Perfect. I hung up too, on my hope of just minding my own business. I looked back at the girl. Okay, kiddo, I'm about to do something very loud and official, I said, lifting my phone. But I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere, okay? She didn't answer, but when I slowly held out my hand, after a long hesitation, she did stand up, very carefully, like any movement might blow something up. We made it to the corner. The Sunrise Diner neon glowed over an empty parking lot. Through the glass, I could see our cook, Marco, scrubbing the grill, and Olivia, the other waitress, taping extra hard on the tip jar. I sat the girl down in the back booth, the one we save for breakups and people who cry on the phone. I called 911 and went down the list. Location, approximate age, alone, not talking, looks scared, possible bruises. The dispatcher confirmed the address, asked me not to leave and not to grill the kid for info about her house, parents. It was kind of funny. We all know the phrase trauma-informed from TikTok and then immediately forget kids don't need a full interrogation from every adult in the vicinity. "I'm gonna grab you some hot chocolate," I told the girl when I hung up. "If you don't like hot chocolate, I'm still bringing it." She gave the tiniest nod, almost invisible. Olivia lifted an eyebrow when she saw us. "Who's that?" "Santa hit the wrong address," I said through my teeth. I called 911. "CPS is on it. Can you make me a kid-size something hot and very sugary?" "Sure." Olivia glanced at the girl, her face softening. "Oh, God." When the girl reached for the mug, her sleeve slid back, and I saw it. A bruise, yellow-blue, like a bad watercolor of a continent covering half her forearm. Not a bike fall bruise, more like somebody held onto her very hard, and it had nothing to do with hugs. My stomach twisted. "Hey," I said gently, "can I give you a different sweatshirt? I've got a spare in my locker. This one's kinda dirty at the bottom." It actually wasn't too bad, but I needed to see the rest, and so would the doctors. In the employee restroom, I pulled my old black diner sweatshirt out of my locker. The girl stood in the middle of the room, frozen. "I'm not going to touch you without permission," I said, mentally reciting the manual. "You can take off your hoodie yourself and put this on. I'll just set it on the sink, okay?" She nodded. Slowly took off the hoodie. I tried very hard to breathe evenly. Her stomach, ribs, shoulder, covered in shadows. Different colors, different stages of healing. Somebody big had been signing their name on that small body. Not with fists, palms, belt, something wide. And I knew that handwriting. My mom's name was Nicole. Her favorite parenting tools were a bottle and a belt. Our trailer burned down when I was 9. Neighbor Pete dragged me out through a window while the fire trucks were still on their way. Nicole didn't get to drag herself out that time. That's how I learned the world can hurt you and save you at the same time. 2 months later, my grandma on my dad's side showed up, Claudia. She took me to New York, to a therapist, to real food, to sheets that didn't smell like cigarettes. I spent years learning how to breathe without counting the steps to the door. My therapist said I'd make a great child psychologist. You'll understand them from the inside. Funny how right he was. In theory. In practice, I turned into a night shift waitress because the system where I was supposed to save kids turned out to be one giant air quote. The girl pulled on my sweatshirt. It was a little big, but that was better. Covered almost everything. "Perfect," I said, even though everything inside me was screaming. "Let's go. We're about to be visited by some people with flashing lights." The cops showed up about 10 minutes later. 10 minutes is forever when you're a scared kid. For a waitress on shift, it's 2 broken glasses and 1 argument with a customer about whether sauce is included. 2 officers, a man and a woman, came in wearing that expression I know from miles away. "We have no idea what we're walking into, but we're already braced for the worst." "You the one who called?" the woman asked. "Yeah." I nodded toward the girl. "Found her alone in the alley? She's not talking. She's clinging to me like I'm the last safe object in the universe." The girl had already grabbed a fistful of my sweatshirt. "We've got an ambulance on the way," the male officer said. "They'll check her out. You can ride with her if she clearly doesn't want to let you go. You'll have to answer some questions at the station later." "I love answering questions," I said dryly. "I even got a degree for that." The ambulance pulled up right after the cops. A paramedic, a woman with soft eyes, crouched down to the girl's level. "Hey, sweetie, My name's Kate. I'm just gonna make sure you're okay, all right? And your, friend? She looked at me. Mia, I said. I found her. Mia can ride with you if you want, Kate told the girl. She can stay right by you. The girl's grip on my sleeve tightened. That was an answer. They took us to the children's wing of the city hospital. A few more adults joined the party, pediatrician, nurse, and a woman in a sensible but warm cardigan, a social worker. About half an hour later, a new figure appeared in the doorway. Guy in a blazer without a tie, tired face. Detective. Detective Miller. He flashed his badge. Oak Ridge PD. Mia, I introduced myself. Waitress and part-time emotional support animal. The social worker, Sarah, let out a tiny snort. The detective did not. She hasn't said a word? He asked. One nod, two sighs, and one attempt to climb into my ribcage, I said. But hey, that's progress. We've already put her info in the missing kids system, Sarah said. And she looked at me. Your name is familiar. You're friends with Tessa Anderson? If she still calls me that, then yeah, I said. She also asked me to tell you this wasn't her fault. Tessa's already looped in, Sarah nodded. She's on her way here. The doctor finished his initial exam and asked me to stay close while they did a few scans and blood work. The girl, still nameless on the chart, held my hand like I was the only anchor in this bright, white, too loud world. Hey, I said quietly when we were finally left alone for a minute. You know your name. I'm sure you do. If you tell it to me, I'll call you by it. If not, I'm gonna call you Sunshine. And in America, that sounds kinda weird sometimes. She was silent for a long time. Then she whispered so softly I almost missed it. Kristen? Hi, Kristen, I said. I'm Mia. We've already met, but you kinda skipped introductions. For a moment, the corner of her mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. Sarah came back with a sheet of paper and a box of markers. Kristen, she said gently, sometimes it's easier for kids to draw than to talk. If you want, you can draw what's going on with you, how you feel. It doesn't have to be pretty, just how it is. Kristen looked at me, like asking for permission. I nodded. She took a marker. Her fingers still shook, but the lines on the page were steady. First, she drew a little girl, stick legs, circle head. Then, towering over her, a huge woman with crooked teeth and green hair. Over her head, Kristen scribbled a sort of crown and wrote in messy kid letters, Witch. Next to the witch, she drew a tall man without a face, holding something black. Farther away, off to the side, she drew a figure on a horse. Underneath, Dad. I didn't need to be a practicing therapist to read that. You're very brave, I said quietly. That's a really clear picture. I handed the paper to Sarah. She exchanged a look with Miller. So, we're looking for a witch and the boyfriend, Miller said darkly. And a dad on a horse. He's obviously not in the same category as the first two, I pointed out. If he was a threat, he'd be standing next to the witch, not riding in from afar. Miller looked at me like I'd just started reading his mind. You're a psychologist? He asked. On paper. In reality, I carry trays and argue with people about the doneness of their steak, I said. But yeah, I remember the basics. He sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. All right, let's hope the dad on a horse exists outside the drawing. About 15 minutes later, he came back with a different look on his face, somewhere between tense and relieved. We've got an Ethan Cole, he said. Reported his 6-year-old daughter, Kristen, missing 3 hours ago. Full custody. Mother, Margaret, had her parental rights terminated for physical abuse and neglect. We've got reports, photos, court records. They were driving from Texas to New York, stopped near Oak Ridge for the night. In the motel parking lot, the girl ran after a cat. He looked away for a second. You know the rest. He's on his way. I felt something unclench inside me. You still looking at him as a suspect? I asked. For now, yes, Miller said honestly. As long as I'm staring at a kid covered in bruises, I don't get to close the suspect list. But, he glanced at the drawing, this does change the angle. Ethan Cole showed up 20 minutes later, tall, dark-haired, unshaven, in a wrinkled t-shirt. The standard look for a man who's spent too many hours behind the wheel and in a police station. They brought him in through a different door, into a separate room. I only saw him through the glass, a guy pacing like a caged animal, gripping his phone, with a lawyer somewhere on speaker, while the detective ran his standard script. Kristen was in the playroom with me, with the drawing and a generic hospital teddy bear. Sarah had told her dad was here, but people with notebooks had to talk to him first. They always talk first, Kristen whispered. Then Dad gets mad. You think he's mad at you? I asked. She shook her head. At them. That was actually good news. After a while, the door opened again. Sarah peeked in. Kristen, she said gently, your dad's here. Do you want to see him? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. She launched herself out of the room. I stood up to follow. Ethan had just enough time to look up before a small missile in my black sweatshirt hit him at about 25 miles an hour. She wrapped herself around him like she never planned to let go again. He froze. Then his arms snapped shut around her, and he buried his face in her hair. I'm not a big fan of words like abyss, but whatever flashed across his face for a second looked a lot like one. Hey, Peanut, he breathed. God, I thought... His voice cracked. Miller stood nearby pretending this was just another item on his checklist. It wasn't working. Ethan, he reminded him, we still need to finish our conversation. I'll do whatever you want, Ethan rasped, still holding on. Just, please don't take her away. Kristen clung harder. Sarah stepped in. Okay, she said in that trained, calm voice. Here's what we're going to do. Ethan, you come with me and Detective Miller to the office and we finish up. Kristen stays here with Mia, who, she glanced at me, is officially a support person. No foster placement tonight, unless we get a reason to consider you a threat. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., both of you come to my office. Got it? Ethan nodded. Kristen's fingers dug into his shirt. I'm not going anywhere, I told her. I'll be right here waiting while you're with them. Promise. She looked up at me, then at her dad, then back at me. You'll come with us? She asked. As far as the law will let me, I said, which was the only honest answer. Miller and Sarah took Ethan to the office. Kristen came back to the playroom with me. She sort of played with plastic animals, but stayed closer to me than my own shadow. About 40 minutes later, the door opened again. This time, Ethan looked no better, but calmer, the kind of calm people get when they've run out of emotional fuel. We're done for tonight, Miller said. They're going home. Home, in his mouth, meant motel, or wherever. Sarah added, Ethan, you've got full custody, confirmed by the court. CPS sees no reason to place Kristen in foster care tonight, as long as you stay in contact, cooperate, and show up tomorrow. She turned to me. And Mia, officially, we can't make you do anything. Unofficially, Kristen has made it very clear she feels safe with you. If you're able to spend the night with them, that would help. At that point, my brain started flipping through my internal schedule. Shifts, bills, the size of my couch. Somewhere on the page where my internal code lives, there's been a line for years. If a kid is terrified, deal with everything else later. I've got a 1-bedroom, I said. 1 decent mattress and 1 IKEA couch that's seen more drama than most therapists. I can give them my bed. Ethan looked at me like I'd just offered not lodging, but a new universe.
Are you sure?
He asked. You don't even know me. I know how your kid ran to you, I said. That's enough for one night. My apartment is on the 3rd floor of an old building where everything creaks, but at least nobody throws parties on Wednesday at 3 a.m. Inside, it's the usual used couch, wobbly kitchen table, and a cat named Tiger I rescued off a supermarket parking lot. Tiger strutted out to meet us, tail straight up, like he owned the deed to the place.
This is how it started,
Ethan muttered when Kristen, seeing the cat, finally let go of him for a second and followed the striped tail. She saw a huge orange cat in the parking lot and decided the world is a safe place where you can run after cats. I finished. Terrible, really. We tucked Kristen into my bed. I found an old college t-shirt for her, Future of Psychology printed across the front, which really tied the night together, irony-wise. Ethan took a shower, and then we sat in my kitchen with cheap tea bags and discount cookies.
Margaret wasn't always a monster,
He started without any warm-up.
At first everyone's normal. Or good at pretending.
I nodded. I knew. He told me his story, how he fell in love with a girl with sad eyes and too loud laughter who grew up with an alcoholic mom and swore she'd never be like that. How the first year after Kristen was born was almost okay, how slowly the bottle showed up in their kitchen again. Evenings. Then, to relax. Then always.
I was working 12-hour shifts,
He said.
I'd come home and not understand why my kid had bruises. She'd say, I fell.
Then I started noticing she flinched when her mother came near. I called CPS. They came, talked to Margaret. She cried, promised she'd fix everything. You know that script. I did. The I'll change speech is the favorite genre of people who don't change anything.
Then there was a night the neighbor called the police.
Ethan went on.
Margaret threw Kristen on the floor. CPS took her into emergency foster care. I spent 3 months in court proving I wasn't the same as her. Eventually, the judge terminated Margaret's rights, gave me full custody. But Kristen stopped talking. She just shut down. We started therapy. I found a clinic in New York that said they could help. I quit my job in Texas. We packed the car, started driving across half the country. And in some crappy parking lot, I got distracted by a screaming text from my boss. Looked away for 30 seconds, and when I turned back, she was gone. He went quiet. The kitchen felt very small. Somewhere in the living room, Tiger was knocking something over. You did what a lot of people never do, I said. You called CPS. You went to court. You took your kid out of there. Most guys in your shoes keep pretending they don't know what's going on at home. Tell that to the detective,
Ethan snorted.
All he saw in my eyes was another dad taking it out on his kid.
They've been burned too, I shrugged.
Otherwise, they wouldn't work that job.
We've all got our scars. I could have told him about Nicole, about the trailer, about Pete, about how Grandma Claudia drove me to New York and my first therapist taught me that crying isn't weakness, it's a biological function. But the night was already overloaded with someone else's pain.
What about you?
He asked.
You clearly know what you're doing.
Why aren't you in an office like Sarah's? I tried, I said. Worked at a school, at a clinic. Everywhere, I was writing reports more than listening to kids. I realized I was documenting trauma more than helping anyone through it. So I went where expectations are honest. In a restaurant, people want coffee, a steak, and for you not to forget their sauce. Nobody pretends you can fix the whole system.
Well, tonight you fixed something very real,
He said.
If it wasn't for you.
He didn't finish. He didn't need to. We sat at my tiny kitchen table, two adults with shattered illusions, drinking cheap tea from mismatched mugs. The schedule for my shifts was pinned to the wall, My electric bill lay on the table, and in the next room, a 6-year-old who'd seen way too much in her life was sleeping soundly. And somehow, it all felt right. Kristen woke up the next morning glued to both of us, one hand on me, one on her dad. We went to CPS like we'd promised. Sarah asked another dozen questions, wrote up a safety plan, noted that Kristen was clearly attached to both adults, shows signs of trauma but also strong recovery potential. Yeah, I read reports automatically. Occupational hazard. Then my regular life snapped back. Night shifts, coffee, people arguing about an $8 bill like their mortgage depended on it. For a while, the whole Kristen situation felt like some weird dream. Until exactly a week later, in the middle of the dinner rush, the door opened and I saw them. He was in a clean button-down, actually rested, still tired around the eyes but without that abyss. She was in a light blue dress with neat braids and a wristband hiding the last of the old bruises, and a smile. A real one. "Got a family reunion out front," Olivia murmured behind my shoulder. "You taking that table?" I was already walking. Kristen saw me first. For a second, she stared like she wasn't sure I was real, then launched herself at me just like she had at her dad that night. "Mia!" Her voice was louder than anything I'd heard from her in the hospital. "I missed you!" If you want to know the weirdest feeling in the world, it's this. A kid who went through all of that telling you she missed you. Not her therapist, not a doctor, not a social worker. A waitress at a cheap diner. "I missed you too," I said honestly, hugging her back. Ethan walked over a little slower, carefully, like grown-ups do when they're afraid to spook something fragile. "We're moving to New York next week," he said. "Clinic agreed to take Kristen into their program. I already found a job. But before that," he hesitated. "We wanted to stop by and say thank you." "Our coffee still sucks," I said. "So this is a bold move." He smiled. "Kristen wanted to show you something," he said. She didn't wait for a cue. She pulled a sheet of paper from her backpack. Another drawing. Same little girl. Same horse. Dad. And another figure, standing next to the horse, in jeans with a ponytail. Over that figure, in bumpy kid letters, it said Mia. "Now the prince has a helper," Kristen said seriously. "And the witch." She paused, thinking. "The witch has a problem now." I felt my throat tighten. This is where I really regret not being the kind of therapist who can say something beautifully profound. I only know how to bring people coffee and sometimes stay when everyone else leaves. "Sounds like a fair universe," I said. Ethan took a breath like he was about to jump into cold water. "We were thinking," he started. "We don't know anyone in New York. Kristen doesn't have anyone except me. And you," he looked straight at me, "you don't owe us anything. But if you ever get tired of arguing over stakes, you've got the degree, you've got the gift, and you've got a little girl who thinks you're her rescuer." He stopped, like he'd scared himself with his own boldness. "And you're offering me what exactly?" I asked. "To move to New York, dive back into the system, and do part-time fairy godmother duty for your princess? I'm offering you..." He lost the thread for a second. "I'm offering you a chance to think about it. And maybe one day walk into that clinic not carrying a tray, but wearing a badge that says Mia Cole, child psychologist." I snorted. "Hold up. Cole? I'm not saying tomorrow," he said quickly. "Or ever. I just..." He spread his hands helplessly. "Sometimes you find someone in an alley. Sometimes in a station. Sometimes behind a counter like this." I didn't have a ready-made answer. Not as a therapist, not as a waitress, not as a person who still counts how many steps to the exit. I just took the pencil from his hand, and under Kristen's drawing I wrote, "See you in New York." Kristen studied the words carefully. "You're gonna come?" she asked.
I
I looked at Ethan, at her, at my counter, at the ticket line hanging in the kitchen window.
I can promise you one thing. I'm never walking past when it comes to your story again. The rest? We'll see.
She nodded, satisfied. Like that was the best contract she'd ever signed. If you made it all the way here and you're still waiting for a moral, here it is. Sometimes the system isn't abstract CPS, courts, detectives, and clinics. Sometimes the system is a waitress who doesn't walk past a kid in an alley at 3 a.m. A detective who actually looks at a crayon drawing. A social worker who doesn't send a child to foster care on autopilot. A father who refuses to pretend he doesn't see bruises. Each of us is one tiny gear in this weird machine called life in America. And sometimes you're the gear that keeps someone else from finally coming apart. Now your turn. What would you do if you found a kid alone in an alley at night, covered in bruises and not saying a word? Tell me in the comments. And yeah, if you ever see a waitress named Mia in New York, don't forget to tip her well. At Christmas, my parents turned away my 11-year-old at the door. She had to walk home alone carrying every gift she'd brought and had to spend Christmas in an empty house. When I found out, I didn't shout. I took action. 5 hours later, their lives started to unravel. I got home late on Christmas night expecting an empty house, because my kid was supposed to be at my parents' place. Big dinner, cousins, and the sleepover she'd been talking about for days like it was the main event of the century. Instead, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Something burnt. Not toast got away from you burnt. More like someone tried to make something special, and it didn't go the way they planned. I stepped into the kitchen and saw it immediately. A pan on the stove with something dark in it. A plate on the table. A little trail of crumbs like someone had been moving around quietly, trying not to make noise. And then I saw what made my stomach drop all the way through the floor. Her shoes. Her coat. My 11-year-old was home.
Emma?
I called.
Hey!
She answered right away. She was sitting at the kitchen table in the same clothes she'd worn when I dropped her off earlier, shoulders tucked in tight like she was trying to take up less space in her own house. Not crying, not dramatic, just small. I stared at her for a second, trying to make reality line up. "You're supposed to be at Grandma and Grandpa's," I said. I know. Her voice was too flat, like she'd practiced it. "Why are you here?" I asked, and I kept my tone calm on purpose. She blinked slowly. They turned me away." I didn't understand that sentence at first, like my brain refused to accept it. "Turned you away?" I repeated. "At the door." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the plate. "They said there wasn't enough space." I stared at her. "Space for what?" She looked at me like I'd asked why snow is cold. "For me." And that's when I noticed the gifts. All of them. Neatly lined up by the entryway, bags upright, tags still attached, tissue paper still fluffed like she couldn't stand the idea of them looking messy, even now. The gifts she'd been so proud of. The gifts we dropped off with her. Back home. My throat tightened. "Why are the gifts here?" Emma swallowed. They didn't want them." My chest went cold. "They told you to take them back?" I asked. She nodded once. I looked at her face, trying to keep mine steady, and asked the question that really mattered. "Why didn't you call me?" Her eyes flicked down. "My phone had died," she whispered. "I asked Grandma if I could use theirs. Like, the house phone." "And?" I asked, even though I already knew. "She said no," Emma said, and her voice cracked on the last word. "She said it would just make it harder. And you were busy." "Busy. Right. And then Grandpa said I should just walk home," she added, like it was the most normal solution in the world.
Because it's not far.
I just stared at her. It's not far when you're an adult who knows the neighborhood. When you're not carrying gift bags that dig into your hands. When you're not 11 and it's Christmas and every window you pass has people inside. How long did you walk? I asked. Maybe 20 minutes, she said quietly. I didn't really know which way at first, because we always drive. Something sharp moved under my ribs and stayed there. I glanced back at the stove, then at the plate in front of her. And this? I said softly. You tried to cook? Her cheeks flushed like she'd been caught stealing. I got hungry, she whispered. And I wanted to, I don't know, make it feel like Christmas. That landed harder than the door turning away. I watched a video, she added quickly. I tried. It just burned. She pointed at the pan. It's fine. I opened the window. The fact that she was trying to reassure me, like she was the problem, made my throat ache. I pulled a chair out and sat beside her. Start from the beginning, I said gently. She took a breath that shook. You dropped me off and I went right up, she said. Like you told me. I nodded. Grandma opened the door and Emma's eyes slid away. Looked surprised. Like she forgot I was coming. My jaw tightened. Then Aunt Dana said, oh. Just, oh. Emma's mouth twisted. And Grandma said it was a full house. Not enough chairs. What about the cousins? I asked, already bracing. They were inside, she whispered. They could see me. She swallowed hard and pushed through anyway. Logan laughed and said my dress looked like a curtain. The word curtain came out bitter. And nobody stopped him? I asked carefully. Emma shook her head. Grandpa said, let's not start drama. I let out a short breath through my nose because dry humor is what happens when rage is too big to hold. Right. Because letting an 11-year-old come inside would have been a real scene. Emma gave a tiny, miserable half-smile. It disappeared immediately. I tried to give Grandma her gift, she whispered. The one I made. My eyes snapped to her. The ornament? She nodded, and tears finally slipped out like her face got tired of pretending. I put her name on it, she said, and she didn't even touch it. She just said, not now. A sob hit her like a hiccup. She turned her face away fast, embarrassed by her own feelings like she was the one being inappropriate. I slid my arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. She leaned into me immediately, like she'd been holding herself upright on stubbornness alone. I'm sorry, she whispered into my sweater. No, I said, steady. You don't apologize for this. She sniffed. I ruined Christmas. You didn't ruin anything, I said. They did. She wiped her face with her sleeve and stared at the plate. I tried, she whispered. I really tried. And that was the whole heartbreak in one sentence. She tried to create Christmas for herself in an empty house because the people who were supposed to love her decided she didn't deserve a chair. I didn't shout. I didn't call my mother and start a screaming match. Emma didn't need to hear that. She didn't need to feel like she caused a war. So I swallowed it. Every sharp word. I held Emma a little tighter, and in my head, something clicked into place. I didn't make a scene. I took action. 5 hours later, their life started to fall apart. I wish I could tell you my parents became like this overnight. It would be comforting in a way, like they caught a virus called entitlement and woke up one morning unable to recognize their own granddaughter. But this wasn't new. It just finally had the audacity to show its face in public. My sister Dana was always the favorite. Not in the subtle parents love you differently way, in the openly distributed scoreboard on the fridge way. Dana was older, louder, easier for them. She was the kid they wanted. I was the kid who showed up later like an unexpected bill. When I was little, my mother used to say things like, "You're so much work." The way some people say, "This suitcase is heavy." Not cruelly, worse, casually, like it was a fact of nature, like needing care was a character flaw. By the time I was old enough to understand tone, I understood mine, burden. And then I got pregnant, young, unplanned. The father barely qualified as present for the part where you need an actual human being. He was around just enough to make promises and then vanish like smoke. I never walked into my parents' house and asked them to fund my life. I didn't have the energy for it. I was too busy being terrified. But they treated me like I'd already sent them an invoice. My father's first reaction was, "So what? We're supposed to pay for this?" My mother's was, "You're ruining this family." As if my pregnancy had personally set fire to their curtains. They bought me a onesie once. One. My mother held it up like she'd sponsored a small village. "See?" she told relatives. "We help her." Then she went back to her life. Dana, of course, played the part of concerned sister. She would show up with advice and disappear the second anything required actual effort. She'd cry when it made her look good. She'd talk about sacrifices she never made. I moved out. I raised Emma alone. I postponed college. I worked an office job because I needed steady hours and a paycheck that didn't bounce. I took evening classes when I could, the kind where you eat dinner out of a plastic container in your car and pretend that's normal. It wasn't glamorous. It was survival. And if I'm honest, survival suited me better than begging. The one person who didn't treat me like a mistake was my grandmother, Ruth. She never asked why I wasn't more careful. She never made me apologize for needing help. She just showed up in the ways she could. Grandma wasn't perfect. She was blunt. She was frugal to the point of comedy. She once told me, "If you buy something full price, you deserve what happens to you," like it was a moral principle. But she was love, in a family that treated love like a limited resource. As she got older, she developed leg issues, pain, weakness, the kind that makes short distances feel like mountains. She could still think clearly. She could still roast you with one sentence. But moving around became harder. And my parents? They acted like she was inconvenient. They'd call her to check in and then brag about it. They'd visit once a month, take a photo, and post it with captions like, "Family is everything." Then they'd leave and not come back. Dana was the same. If Grandma was a person, Dana forgot she existed. If Grandma was an inheritance, suddenly Dana cared deeply. I was the one who drove Grandma to appointments, the one who brought groceries, the one who learned how to help her safely so she wouldn't fall when she stood up. I even took a short caregiving course because I was tired of feeling like I was guessing with someone I loved. It saved money. It made me useful. It made Grandma feel less helpless, which mattered more than any certification. And the more time I spent with her, the more I noticed something uncomfortable. My parents treated Grandma the way they treated me, like a burden, like a task, like a thing you tolerate until you can go back to your real life. Meanwhile, Grandma helped them, financially, quietly, the way she did everything, without fanfare, without splashing it around. At some point, my parents moved into a house that everyone in the family referred to as the house Grandma gave them. That phrase became gospel. Grandma gave them the house. Grandma gifted it. Grandma wanted them to have space for family. My parents started speaking about it like it was theirs by divine right. And after they got it, they visited Grandma even less. It was almost impressive, the way they treated generosity like a completion stamp. Like once Grandma gave them something, she had no further value. Grandma, meanwhile, lived in a small rental by choice. She said it was easier, less to clean, less to worry about. She didn't want a big place to manage by herself. She liked comfort, not attention. And that's why Christmas mattered. Grandma couldn't join the big celebration this year. Her legs were worse. The idea of a crowded house and stairs and chaos was too much. My parents didn't offer to go to her. They didn't offer to bring dinner. They didn't even offer to FaceTime her until I suggested it. So I chose her. And I chose Emma too, by letting her have the big family Christmas she'd been dreaming of. My parents' house was always fancy and organized, the way Emma loved. Kids' friends invited, games, cookies, a cousin's sleepover that felt like a rite of passage. Emma put her whole heart into those gifts. She saved. She made things. She worried about what people would like. She was proud of it. She didn't mind me not coming because to her, it was still family. That's what made it so crushing when they told her she should celebrate with someone else. Not enough chairs. Not enough space. Not enough room for her. And while they sat around their table feeling satisfied with their perfect Christmas, they didn't know what was already starting to unravel. That night, I had 2 jobs: get my daughter back to herself, and keep my parents from doing any more damage while she was still bleeding on the inside. Emma wasn't dramatic about it. That was the problem. She moved around our kitchen like she was trying not to disturb the air, like she didn't deserve to take up space in her own house. I didn't lecture her about the stove. I didn't point at the burnt pan like it was Exhibit A in why you shouldn't cook alone. We could talk about safety later. Tonight, the bigger emergency was shame. So I did what moms do when they don't have the right words. I made hot chocolate and pretended I wasn't furious enough to chew through drywall. Extra marshmallows, because trauma is not the time to practice moderation. Emma sat at the table with her mug between her hands like it was the only warm thing left in the world. Every few minutes, her eyes drifted to the gifts lined up by the door, still perfect, still unwanted. I kept catching myself thinking, I should drive over there. I should knock. I should make them say it to my face. And then I'd look at my daughter's shoulders, how tight they were, how small she'd made herself, and I'd swallow it. Because I wasn't going to turn her night into a screaming match soundtrack. Then my phone buzzed. Grandma Ruth. Not a long, chatty call. Grandma Ruth didn't do long and chatty unless she was giving you advice you didn't ask for. She did check-ins. Practical, efficient. I answered and put it on speaker because my hands were busy and because Emma's whole face lifted just hearing the ringtone. Hey, Grandma. Put me where I can see you, she said immediately. No hello. Grandma didn't waste time on greetings when she could be efficient with love. So I switched to video. Grandma appeared on my screen with her glasses on, and that look she got when she was about to correct someone's pronunciation. Emma leaned toward the phone like it was a window. Merry Christmas, Great-Grandma, she said, trying so hard to sound normal that it made my throat tighten. Grandma's face softened. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Emma smiled. It lasted half a second. Then it wobbled, and the tears showed up anyway. Quiet, stubborn tears she didn't want anyone to see. Grandma didn't miss it. Grandma never missed it. What happened? She asked, calm but sharp, like her brain had already started putting pieces together. Emma glanced at me with that kid panic. Don't get anyone in trouble. And then she broke anyway, because truth doesn't stay trapped forever. They wouldn't let me in, she whispered. Grandma's expression went still. Who? Grandma and Grandpa, Emma said, and her voice cracked. They said there wasn't space, and they didn't take the gifts. Grandma blinked once, slow. The kind of blink that means I am choosing my next words carefully because I don't want to say something that ends in arson. Emma wiped her face fast. I tried to use their phone, she added, like she needed to justify herself. Mine had died. I asked. They said no. Grandma's mouth tightened. And you walked home? Grandma asked. Emma nodded. Grandpa said it wasn't far. Grandma didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She looked straight at my daughter through the screen and said, "Sweetheart, you listened to me. You did nothing wrong. Nothing." Emma made a little sound like she wanted to climb inside those words and live there. Grandma continued, "You were polite. You brought gifts. You showed up. If anyone should be ashamed, it's the people who shut a child out at their door." Emma's chin trembled. I pulled her closer with my arm, and she leaned into me like she'd been holding herself up on pride alone. Grandma's gaze flicked to me. "Kate." "Yes," I said, already braced. Her voice sharpened. "I gave them that house so they'd have space for family. Space. For family." I didn't interrupt. I didn't steer. I didn't feed her lines. I just sat there, holding my child, letting Grandma connect her own dots. Grandma's eyes narrowed. "And they used that space to turn my great-grandchild away." I felt my stomach drop. Because when Grandma got quiet, people got consequences. "I won't allow it," she said. "Grandma," I started, automatically, because I wasn't trying to light a match near gasoline. "No," she cut in. "My legs hurt. That's all. My brain works." "I know," I said softly. Grandma's voice went even calmer. "I'm going to undo it." I blinked. "Undo what?" "The house," she said. I stared at the screen. "Grandma, you can't ungift a house." Grandma's lips twitched, barely. "You'd be surprised what you can do when people don't read paperwork." It sounded like a riddle. It sounded like a promise. Emma sniffed and wiped her face again, trying to pull herself together like she hadn't just been told she didn't deserve a chair. Grandma softened toward her. "Finish your cocoa," she ordered gently. "And next Christmas, you'll be where you belong." Emma nodded, small and careful. We ended the call a minute later. Grandma told Emma she loved her. Grandma told me to lock my doors. Grandma never missed an opportunity to assume the world was full of criminals, including my parents. After that, I focused on the only thing that mattered: getting my daughter through the rest of the night without letting that shame set like concrete. We watched a movie. We sat under a blanket. Emma fell asleep in that exhausted way kids do when they've held themselves together for too long. And then, before midnight, before my brain could even finish processing Grandma's paperwork comment, my phone rang again. "Mom." I answered, and she didn't even inhale first. "What did you do?" No hello. No, "Is Emma okay?" Just pure, panicked rage. I held the phone away from my ear. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play stupid," she snapped. "Grandma called us. On Christmas. She's saying the house isn't ours and we have to move out." My stomach dropped, hard. "What?" I said, genuinely. "You think this is funny?" she shrieked. "While we were all celebrating, you went over there to poison her against us." "I didn't. You're a snake," she spat. "You've always been jealous. You've always wanted what we have." I stared at the dark kitchen, at the burnt pan, at the gifts lined up like a silent witness. "I don't know what Grandma told you," I said carefully, "but I didn't plan anything. I didn't even know." "Oh, please," my mother snapped. "You've been circling her like a vulture." Something in me went cold and clean. "My daughter came home tonight," I said, low. "She was turned away at your door. She walked home alone with gifts you refused to take." There was a pause. Half a second of silence where I could almost hear her brain searching for a way to make that not matter. Then she hissed, "Don't change topics." "Of course." "You excluded a child," I said. "On Christmas." "We didn't have enough chairs," she snapped. "And she was fine. You're raising her to be dramatic, just like you." "She stood outside your door," I said, each word controlled. And you wouldn't even let her use your phone. My mother's voice rose. You should have kept her with you then. You're the one who abandoned her. The audacity was almost impressive. And then she said it, like it had been sitting on her tongue for years, waiting for a reason. We should have excluded you a long time ago. Like Emma's Christmas was just collateral damage in a larger project, punishing me for existing. I said quietly, You're not going to rewrite what you did. My mother laughed, sharp and ugly. You think you've won? You think Grandma is stable? Then, in a voice that made my skin crawl, she added, We'll handle her. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, staring at my phone like it had turned into an animal. Grandma had said she would undo something. My mother was terrified. My daughter was asleep down the hall with tear tracks still faint on her face. And I still didn't understand how any of this was possible, only that something had started moving, and my parents were already trying to grab the wheel. The next morning, I called Grandma Ruth. No answer. I called again. Nothing. That, by itself, didn't send me into a panic spiral immediately. Grandma was many things. Tech-savvy wasn't one of them. Sometimes she'd leave her phone in a drawer and forget the drawer existed. But it didn't sit right in my stomach. I tried again. Still no answer. Emma came into the kitchen rubbing her eyes, hair sticking up like she'd fought a pillow and lost. Did Great-Grandma call? She asked softly. No, I said, keeping my voice light. Not yet. Emma's mouth tightened. Is she mad at me? My heart clenched. No, baby. No, none of this is your fault. Emma nodded like she wanted to believe me, but shame doesn't disappear because you tell it to. We're going to go see her, I said. Okay. We'll bring her the cocoa mix she likes. Emma's face softened a little. Okay. We drove to Grandma Ruth's place mid-morning. It was quiet, like the world was still recovering from Christmas. I knocked, waited, knocked again. No answer. I tried calling her from the porch. Still nothing. Maybe she's sleeping, Emma offered. Maybe, I said, but my hand was already moving to my keyring. Grandma had given me a spare key for emergencies, and her definition of emergency included, if I don't answer my phone and you get annoying. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was too quiet. Not old person napping quiet. Empty quiet. I moved through the living room, calling her name. No response. Then I saw what was missing. Her wheelchair wasn't by the wall where it always was. The blanket she used every night was gone from the chair. A small bag by the door. Gone. My breath caught. Emma's voice came from behind me, small. Where is she? I don't know, I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. I walked outside, hands shaking now, and went straight to the neighbor across the hall. She opened the door in her robe, hair in a clip, that exact face people make when they're about to say something they know you won't like. Oh, honey, she said before I could even speak. Your mother was here. My stomach dropped. When? Early, she said. Like, morning early. I was taking my trash out. They had a car down front. Did Grandma go with them? I asked, and I hated how my voice sounded. Too controlled, too polite, like I was asking about a package delivery. The neighbor hesitated. They had her chair. Your mother was talking fast. Your grandmother didn't look happy. Did she say where they were taking her? I asked. The neighbor shook her head. No, I didn't hear that part. I'm sorry. Of course she didn't. People like my mother don't announce where they're taking you when you don't have a choice. I thanked the neighbor because I'm apparently the kind of person who says thank you while her life is imploding. Then I walked back into Grandma's apartment and stood there for half a second, trying to decide how to breathe. Emma was by the doorway, gripping the cocoa mix box like it was a weapon. "Did they?" she started. "I don't know," I said. And then, because she's 11 and her brain goes places, I added immediately, "She's alive. She's okay. We're going to find her." I did not believe my own calm voice. I just needed her to borrow it. I called my mom, straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I called my dad. Voicemail. I stood in the hallway outside Grandma's place, staring at my phone like if I glared hard enough it would start behaving. Emma tugged my sleeve. Maybe they took her to their house? That was the first sensible idea anyone had said all morning. So we drove. The whole way there, I kept checking my mirrors like the world had suddenly become unsafe in a way I couldn't name. Emma sat quietly, eyes fixed on her lap, and I could feel her trying to be good so I wouldn't fall apart. When we pulled into my parents' driveway, I didn't even turn the engine off the normal way. I just killed it and got out. I knocked. Hard. My mother opened the door like she'd been expecting me, and her face was already set for battle. "Where is Grandma?" I said. Her eyes narrowed. "Lower your voice." I stared at her. "Where is Grandma?" "She's fine," my mother snapped. "And you're not barging in here to upset her." "I'm not here to argue," I said, and my voice did that cold thing it does when I'm trying not to explode in front of a child. "I'm here to see my grandmother." My mother stepped into the doorway like a bouncer. "After what you did?" "I didn't do anything," I said, "except come home to my kid sitting alone with burned food because you wouldn't let her inside." "Don't start," my mother hissed. "I'm not starting," I said. "I'm finishing." Emma stood behind me, very still. My mother glanced at her and then looked away like eye contact might make her feel something. "Your grandmother is resting. She doesn't need your drama." "Then let her tell me that," I said. "Let me hear it from her." My mother's lips pressed tight. "No." That single word was the moment everything changed. Not because I expected my mother to be reasonable. I've met her, but because she was blocking me from even seeing Grandma. That's not family drama. That's control. I pulled my phone out again and dialed 911. My mother's face twisted. "Are you serious?" "Yes," I said, and I didn't blink. "I'm serious." She made a sound like I was embarrassing her, which, honestly, was a nice break from her usual hobby of embarrassing me. I told the dispatcher exactly what I knew. My grandmother was missing from her home. Her mobility equipment and belongings were gone. My mother had taken her early that morning, and my family was refusing to let me confirm she was okay or even speak to her. I didn't give a speech. I didn't theorize. I just gave facts. Emma's hand slid into mine while we waited. Small, cold, trusting. When the officers arrived, my mother immediately switched into her "I pay taxes" voice. "Oh, good," she said brightly, like this was a neighborhood meeting. "There's been a misunderstanding." The officer didn't smile. "We need to see your grandmother." My mother's face tightened. "She's resting. We still need to see her," he said. Same tone. Not rude. Not negotiable. My mother stalled just long enough to make my heart bang against my ribs. Then she stepped aside like she was being personally oppressed. Grandma was in the back room, in her wheelchair, blanket across her lap, eyes sharp. The second she saw me, something in my chest unclenched so hard it almost hurt. Relief hit first, then anger, right behind it. Emma made a small sound and moved forward before I could stop her. Grandma reached out and took her hand like she'd been waiting for that specific proof of life. "There you are," Grandma said, voice rough. Emma nodded, tears already forming. "I thought you were mad." Grandma's eyes flashed. "I'm mad at the right people. One of the officers crouched down a little.
Ma'am, are you okay? Are you here because you want to be?
Grandma didn't hesitate.
No!
My mother jumped in.
She's confused.
Grandma turned her head slowly and said,
If you interrupt me again, I'm adding it to the list.
The officer looked back at Grandma.
Do you want to leave? Yes,
Grandma said.
now.
My mother's mouth opened, closed, opened again. It was like watching someone realize their favorite puppet learned how to cut strings. The officers didn't lecture anyone. They didn't do a courtroom monologue. They just made space, literally and figuratively. They made it clear Grandma could leave. And when Grandma rolled past my mother, she didn't even look at her. That silence said more than any yelling. I got Grandma into my car. Emma climbed in beside her without being asked and held her hand like she was anchoring her to the planet. Grandma looked at me and said, "Call my lawyer." Grandma called her lawyer. He agreed to see us that day. I drove. Her lawyer didn't dress it up. He looked at me and said, "Here's what your family has been calling a gift." He slid a folder across the desk.
The house isn't in your parents' names, he said. It's owned by Grandma's living trust. Your parents were listed as beneficiaries, meaning they were set to receive it after Grandma dies. But while Grandma is alive, she can change the beneficiaries.
My stomach dropped.
So they've been acting like it already belongs to them. They've been acting like a lot of things,
Grandma muttered. Her lawyer didn't even blink.
Grandma can also change how her other assets are distributed. Her savings, her accounts, all of it. Same idea. Beneficiaries can be updated.
Grandma tapped the arm of her wheelchair.
Good, because they don't get a reward for turning a child away at the door.
He asked Grandma a few straightforward questions, calm, respectful, just confirming she understood what she was signing and that no one was pressuring her.
Grandma answered like she was personally offended the world required proof she still had a brain. Then he printed what needed printing.
Grandma signed. Witnesses signed. Pages were initialed. And just like that, the names my parents thought were carved in stone weren't. My name went where theirs used to be. Emma's future was protected right alongside it. Because Grandma wasn't just angry, she was deliberate. Emma sat close the whole time, quiet, holding Grandma's hand like she was afraid someone would drag her away again. When it was done, Grandma looked at her lawyer and said, "Now, I want them kept away from me." He nodded once, already reaching for another set of documents.
We'll put that in writing too, and we'll start the process to get them out of the house.
Grandma turned her sharp gaze on me. "I gave them space," she said. "They used it to shrink a child." Emma's eyes filled, but this time she didn't look ashamed. She looked relieved. Grandma squeezed her fingers. "Next Christmas," she told her. "You're not standing outside anyone's door." Fast forward to next Christmas. Emma and I are in the house my parents used to call theirs. Not because I wanted some trophy, because Grandma wanted the truth reflected in paperwork. The place is worth about $350,000, and she moved in with us after everything went down. We made it actually livable for someone in a wheelchair, a ramp, wider doorways, grab bars, a bedroom on the main floor. Funny how not enough space magically turns into plenty of space when you're not using it to punish people. Grandma also had about $200,000 in savings. She changed the beneficiaries on all of it. Part went into an emergency cushion for her care. The rest went where she wanted it to go. A college fund for Emma and a future she doesn't have to beg for. My parents got exactly what they earned. Nothing. They tried calling, apologizing, blaming, switching the order, like that changes the story. I don't answer. Emma's different now. Quieter in a calmer way. Not the, Make myself small so I don't get rejected way. And Grandma? Still sharp, still stubborn, still very pleased with herself. So tell me, did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.